recording.
Textiles have been part of my entire life, whether it has been in the construction of clothing, creating quilts, or fiber art. It has always answered that call for the tactile connection I have and need in my life. Through my textiles, my work explores the topics of sexism, racism, and in general discrimination of any kind. Taking a stand on these issues through exhibiting my art lets the viewers know we have alternative ways to think, and by opening up lines of communication, we can become better citizens. Through the early years of my life, which were in an area of the United States that was settled by a religious organization that obtained most of the township's property I lived on through the land rush of the 1800s. Whether it was for personal gain or need, the settlers had started selling plots of their land. What they did not seem to understand was once buyers purchased the land, it no longer belonged to them. This meant new families, churches, and businesses all living in the area received the same non-welcoming method they used, which was to shun new families and severely limit contact with them. Not being able to speak to them, purchase the produce they grew, the eggs their hens laid, was strange to me as a child, but because in their eyes we did not belong, this created a memory of not belonging that my family and others have had the burden of carrying all of our lives. Most recently, I contacted family members still living in that township and was told it had not changed and that religious bias was still alive and thriving. With the use of color, stitching, and sometimes finally just putting the written word on fabric, I have tried to express my thoughts on discrimination. Unknowingly to me, I have had an aversion to the color blue most of my life and never really gave it a second thought until I dyed some string with natural indigo just to see where it might lead my creative process. The dyed string sat on a drying rack for a long time until a friend picked it up and placed it in her hands, and something clicked at that moment. So far, I have dyed 60,000 feet of cotton string, 400 feet of cotton rope, and more wood planks than I can count. Finally, one day, my daughter asked me why I would dye so much indigo when I did not like the color blue. When I refused to answer her, she pressed on. Finally, relenting, I told her it reminded me of my youth. Without even realizing it, I had transferred my thoughts of seeing farmers in blue denim and the wooden barns to finally deciding I had this need to explore this avenue until I could reconcile my thoughts. With my textile installation, Thoughts of the Mind, Interpretations in Indigo, I explore my thoughts and the journey to recognize and heal the bias that permeated my life and continues to haunt me. The indigo string represents the confusing and tangled thoughts I have carried in my mind most of my life. The larger rope is my mind finally reconciling what I have learned through the creative process of making this installation. When I finished dyeing the wood, I created the layering effect and realized it reminded me of the farmers' barns of my youth. The chair was my personal determination to build something new just for me from the wood, creating a new beginning. Most importantly, the quilt is one my parents purchased when I was a child, when the matriarch of the family died and there was an estate sale of some of her personal belongings. As an adult looking back, I have realized that my family's life started on a downward spiral with the purchase of that quilt after we moved into that small town. While researching the history of indigo, I learned that it is associated with slavery in the United States and around the world. Indigo grew wild on the African coast, and slaves that worked with the indigo in its process rarely lived beyond 7 years after becoming forced to cultivate and produce the indigo. What I learned while researching indigo gave me clarity and made me realize that I did not just decide to use indigo as the vessel for my thoughts, but that indigo found me on this journey of discovery. My personal mantra is, life beats us down, but through our art, we can make a difference. This recording is by Bonnie J. Smith. Thoughts of the Mind, Interpretations in Indigo at Olive Hyde Gallery in Fremont, California.